Why is airbrushing so difficult? Well, there's two main reasons, and in this video I'm going to share them with you. Let's get into it right now. Now I know that you're keen to get started creating some amazing artwork, especially if this is your first airbrush. And even if you're creating artwork that's as easy as these space designs, something a little bit more complex like this steampunk sci-fi artwork, or even more realistic like this eye and this black and grey eye, or even if you simply want to just create some cool skulls. Even though that you're very excited to get started, and that's a great thing, you need to understand a couple of the fundamentals that will make airbrushing easier for you and not so difficult. Let me explain. So the first thing that you're going to notice when you start to learn how to airbrush is that you're not touching the surface. So you're hovering from the surface. So depending on what surface you're painting on, so in this case I'm just using an A3 art book. But the hardest thing to get used to is, well, where am I going to end up when I'm not touching the surface? Because with a pencil I can easily draw whatever I wish, and it's a lot easier to do because I am touching the surface. So it just feels a lot easier, a lot more natural. Whereas with the airbrush then, how will I know where the paint's going to come out? So you need to start to practice aiming on the surface and trying to learn how to control your strokes. And a good way to practice is to just quickly sketch something basic and try and outline it. So a couple of things that I like to do to help with keeping my airbrush nice and steady, and just to also get the feel from working away from the surface, is that I like to use two hands. So instead of using one hand, even though I can airbrush like that no problem, I can still get fine lines and broad spray, but trying to get perfectly straight lines without using both hands is a lot more difficult than by grabbing with your second hand, steadying the airbrush, and you can even rest on the surface and then use that as a guide and then move with your brush. And you can see I'm able to get nice straight lines. And just to show you again from a different angle so that you can see the height. So if I'm not using both hands, no steadying, I can paint them in relatively easily. But once I use that second hand, I can lean on the surface and then I can steady myself with that hand. And it also becomes a guide so that I'm not adjusting my height like so, which will then adjust the amount of paint that's coming out. And you can see the further away I am, it's going to be spraying a much broader spray, whereas if I'm up close, that's when you can go nice and fine. So again, from this angle, steadying myself so that my height stays the same. And you can see my speed's nice and consistent as well. Even by slowing down, so if I start to slow down, it's a lot harder to keep a nice, even, straight line. And just another demonstration so you can see what it looks like and how close I am. And then for a broad spray, I'm generally about 10 centimeters away from the surface, and I'm really opening up that trigger. And this is the same sort of thing if you want to do broad spray dots, then you're further away again, and you're just lightly building up the paint on the surface, and that's going to give you overspray that travels right out from the inner section, and it'll be heavier on the inner. Or if you want to do fine dots, again, I use my hand as a guide and I just pull back on that trigger only a little bit, and that will allow me to create some real fine dots. So you can really see how height plays a massive factor when you're airbrushing, and it's one of the first main challenges that you're going to have to deal with when you are starting to learn how to airbrush. So whether you're doing real fine detail and you need to be up close and pulling back less on the trigger, or if you want to really pump on the paint, then you need to be further away and really opening up that trigger. So learn how to master your height. That will then help you to create all of the strokes that you'll need to create whatever artwork it is that you're interested in doing. Whether that's basic stuff to more detailed, it's all made up of sharper shadows, lines, dots, a whole mix of different techniques. The next difficult thing to master is pretty much on a double action airbrush like this one here. And that means that it's double action, so you press down for air and you can see nothing's coming out. And then when I pull back on that trigger, you'll see here, pull back on the trigger, paint will come out. So you can see I'm pressing down for air, nothing's coming out, and then as I pull back on the trigger, we're getting paint coming out. So this is hard to master because it's a constant coordination that you have to master before you can really start to get the performance out of your airbrush. And it's kind of like patting your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time, because you need to keep this trigger pressed down while you pull back. So you don't want to do this. You don't want to hear that air going on, off, on, off. It should be on all the time and then just pull back on the trigger. So for fine lines, you just pull back a little, but ever so slightly, and you move with the airbrush. Or for broad spray, you pull back quite a bit, so almost full trigger, and then you move slower with the airbrush, and that's going to build up on the surface. So I'll demonstrate. So pressing down for air, pulling back, moving slowly, we're going to get a broad spray. And then for fine detail, up close and just pulling back a little bit, but moving consistently with that airbrush. And again, from a different angle, this time steadying myself. Keep the airbrush and the speed the same, and I've got that air pressed down at all times. So again, up close, pulling back a little. So same amount of paint, I'm just moving consistently with that speed, and my height's not changing. If I change my height, you can see it's going to start to blur out, and if I change my speed, it's also going to affect the stroke. So again, the double action technique is really crucial, as well as, like I mentioned earlier, the height. They're the two main factors that you need to really practice when you first get your airbrush, and these are going to help you to create all sorts of artwork. I know it's going to be frustrating to start with, but persist and you will get there. So to continue your learning, be sure to check out some of the other videos that I've got listed here. And if you want to fast track your learning, then check out our online airbrushing course at airbrushasylum.thinkific.com.